Welcome everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, or maybe even good morning, depending on when you're diving in. I'm Chris Armstrong with Sparx Services North America, and I'm proud to have my co-presenter, Nathalie Pelser, the Director of Enterprise Architecture at ATT Mexico.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Nathalie. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction to Sparx Services North America. And basically, what we do is help people adopt architecture and engineering and modeling best practices. We do that in a couple of ways. One, by contributing to industry standards. So we are members of the Object Management Group in standards such as UML, SysML, UPDM, UAF, and many other 3- and 4-letter acronyms. We're also contributors to architecture standards at the Open Group, as well as at an industry vertical for the telecommunications business called the TM Forum. And then Nathalie, you want to tell us a little bit about ATT Mexico?
Yeah, ATT Mexico started 8 years ago. It was a merge of USFL, Unifone, Nextel. And as per the first Q of 2023, we were around 21 million subscribers, which represents the third largest provider in Mexico. And we had 833 million revenue, which was overall increase of 28% versus last year. We have 18,000 employees. We work in factory trains of SAFE, 20 of them. We are around 80 architects, and we are working on 140 projects. So when we started early 2022 in ATT Mexico, our team was coming from AT&T Latam. We started to work on the enterprise architecture practice. We wanted to have the tools, to have the interaction, the collaboration, and make sure that EA becomes everybody way of life or way of working. So we evangelize, we train, we integrate multiple relevant industry standards together. We brought TOGAF, ArchiMate, TM Forum, telecommunication forum for the one who doesn't know about TM Forum. So we wanted to bring all of these standards together to make them alive, because as you know, often they think enterprise architecture is just theory. We wanted really to make it way of life or way of working. So we started, the difficulty we had is because the architects didn't report to us. They were organized by different tower or business domains, and we were having around 80 architects, from enterprise architect, application solution architect. So the work we saw, the approach we decided to take was to train, to mentor, to evangelize, to bring them to use our tools. So we are doing in parallel two things. We are bringing the tools, integrating the tools from inventory to CMDB, to report, strategical reporting, of course, with Sparx ProCloud and Sparx Prolaborate. And the idea was to try them, show them what you can do, how much can make your life easier. And at the end was for us to be able to start to put some kind of governance and see architecture as a whole instead of as parts that were working in parallel. So you want to go to the next one, or?
Okay, and I was just going to add one thing, okay. Nathalie, as you know, one of the challenges in many organizations is getting people to use the tools.
Yes.
And one of the advantages we have, although sometimes it didn't seem like that, Nathalie, is Nathalie's team, took ownership of what we call the legacy EA tool, which was a custom website application that they put together that was is mandatory for all projects to use, specifically to get technology and security architecture approvals. And I forget when you turned that off, Nathalie, but as soon as we turned it off, using the new platform was a necessity and a requirement.
Yes, 6 months back in March, or a bit less. Yeah. So here was. Yep. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
That is your expertise. No. Okay.
So go ahead. Yep, you do it.
Okay, so when we started, because we did implemented that already in ATT Latam, when we started, we were looking mainly at ProCloud, and we brought into ProCloud the iteration on the methodology of TOGAF, and we also had the web front. Back then was not Prolaborate, and Prolaborate came to save us with all of the security layer and the collaboration that brought. And we were having another challenge, was how to bring what is already existing, the best of the telecommunication, instead of reinventing the wheel, how to extend all of these frameworks. So it's where I met Chris, where he helped me to solve my problem, was how to bring a modeling ArchiMate using an inventory tool that is also a collaborating tool, but also able to extend the frameworks to don't reinvent all of the open digital architecture framework that the TM Forum offer, from information framework to open API to business process framework, was really make the tool be useful, not only be documentation static or reference. Becomes like our daily tool for all of the architects to start with, and later on, as we will show you, for all of the rest of the solution architects, engineers, technology engineers, operations, security, etc. I don't know if you want to add something else.
Nope. And again, like you prefaced at the beginning, Nathalie, this is all about trying to not be hypocrites as architects. Namely, a big principle of architecture is reuse. So why build something from scratch when there's suitable fit for purpose components out there? So again, taking the standards from the TM forum, the open group, and then how we extended or representing the TM forum, again using a custom MDG technology based on ArchiMate. And again, trying to accelerate the architecture practice by building on proven, well-defined components from standards organizations to really, accelerate and jumpstart the architecture practice. So you want to talk a little bit about the IT organization, Nathalie?
Yeah. So everything we are going to show you now was modeled and stored on exposed into Sparx and Prolaborate. Yes, Sparx and Prolaborate. So nothing was made outside. The idea was to keep the information in, to everybody to participate, and everybody have the information, the latest version, in a one unique place. So here we summarize how our IT organization was divided, with the different factories who are included in each factories train on the safe we are implementing on, I think, becoming kind of expert on the agile safe methodology. So from digital platform, where we stand at the bottom, the architecture and data, the digital backend and fulfillment factory is the one that also manage.
Yep. And so each one of the, so just FYI for some of the Sparx users, this is again an ArchiMate diagram, of course, done in custom style, as you might guess, because again, there's a lot of audiences who really don't care about the ArchiMate semantics and notation. So to those folks, this just looks like a nested box diagram that someone might have created in Visio or something, but it is a true ArchiMate diagram, and we actually again created a custom MDG technology for ATT Mexico. So Tower, Factory, and Guilds, for example, are extensions of ArchiMate business actors. Like Nathalie said, each one of the factories is an agile release train in the context of the scaled agile method or SAFe. And one of the things that we did, I'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit later, is we've integrated the Enterprise Architecture repository with ServiceNow, and each of these towers and factories are represented in ServiceNow as portfolios in the PPM module and programs in the SAFe module. So we've basically synchronized the organization structure between the way we're representing it in the EA repository with ArchiMate and native constructs in the SAFe and PPM modules. All right, that's enough for that, Nathalie. So you can talk a little bit more about the digital backend and fulfillment factory.
Well, the chance we had is we were not only enterprise architecture, but we also were bringing in our predicament into the reality. So that was a big thing within our vice presidency, that we were able not only to speak about what we should be doing, but we were doing it at the same time. So our digital backend and fulfillment factory was leveraging all of our digital channels on implementing all of the architecture integration, data integration, data near real-time integration, all of the concept of reusability, of API gateway with the layer of security when you expose anything from your backend, also adding the identity management SIAM module. We're leveraging WSO2, so we were able to implement what we were saying to everybody else they were supposed to do for the digital layer. So that was a really, and we brought as part of open architecture as much possible open source, from WSO2s to IMAP to Blue Marble. Even some of them have a small license where more support enterprise, but we try to become independent of the big names, so the software decoupling. We really push for the decoupling as much as we can. Even if we were having a backend, we were still very monolithic. This layer allows us to bring to market faster, safer, at a reduced cost, the solution that the digital channels needed to bring. So if we go a little bit to the detail, to the next slide, unless you want to add something.
No, just to clarify for everybody. So in the digital backend and fulfillment factory that Nathalie leads, there are 4 initiatives that are identified in the ServiceNow SAFe portfolio that represent the 3 or the 4 pink boxes. And then the next 4 slides are going to zoom in each one of those in just a little bit more detail.
Okay, so our layer that we brought with WSO2, as I was explaining, brought us the API manager on the SIAM to have a federated identity, but also to have a unique platform on the top of WSO2 to manage the APIs, and to add any security layer, to also bring different ways to authorize, authenticate our customer, to be able to bring to the company additional information like the social login can be, or to be able to control who access to what, and provide SLAs, like if you have a service that you want to start to deprecate, you can reduce the SLA thanks to the API manager. So really taking advantage of the full platform of WSO2. Today we have already all of it implemented, and we are bringing into it all of the APIs of the companies.
Yep, and one of the things that we're also in the process of doing right now is pulling in the APIs from WSO2 into the EA repository.
Correct.
To try to achieve a couple of objectives, namely make those APIs available to solution architects when they're doing their modeling, so they can reference them directly instead of every modeler or every team having to create the APIs in their local workspaces over and over and over again. And that way we can get a clear view of who's producing these APIs and more importantly who's consuming these APIs, in what use cases, and also to provide some greater visibility into API governance through the Architecture Council about what is the inventory of APIs, and when a new API is proposed, providing again better visibility through Prolaborate, particularly whether a request for a new API functionality, should that be implemented by an existing API that we create a new version, because as many people know from experience, a lot of times APIs in a microservices environment can have a tendency of over proliferating. People create duplicate APIs that really do the same thing, but they're specified or implemented differently. So we're very hopeful that using the EA repository is going to help us as an organization, better govern the API landscape.
So here again, how to use best practice of architecture of reusability, avoid duplicate, thanks to the tool, and because the good thing of having the inventory in the repository is not only visibility for the technical team, but also for the business team, for our upper management, because they will have access through the Prolaborate and say, okay, they're asking me to spend so much money in so many API, but show me the result, show me how I can solve, how can I increase my time to market. So we gave a few examples where like the e-commerce platform has been reusing the CRM effort, and then we were able to go in production in 3 months, which was a record time for us.
Yep.
So you want
to talk a little bit about IPD?
No. Well, if you want to go ahead.
No.
No, sorry, the next slide. Yeah, the next slide. Sorry. Yeah. So in the next slide, so was the other building block of our factory, other initiative, who was lead for one of my peers, was with the data integration on near real-time architect, enterprise architect. So what we brought to the company was the tool called K2View, was bringing you the enterprise data near of the services on the API, near to the digital platform. So we use the Blue Marble as our API platform, and we use a microservices accelerator of IMAP. So these three working together was allowing us to build with a template very quick our service, use all of the get data from K2View, and accelerate the life cycle through the IMAP.
And then I could talk to EA chapter. This is the initiative that I personally have been most involved in. So this is just a graphical representation. Again, this is an ArchiMate model in custom style. Just FYI, most of the elements on these diagrams are ArchiMate resources, which are high-level abstractions that are part of the strategy layer. But basically trying to show that we have our architecture framework TOGAF, using the architecture development method for the EA work that people are doing that's governed by the Architecture Council. We're using ArchiMate as our baseline modeling language. We have had to use a little bit of UML and a little bit of BPMN for some special modeling tasks, but ArchiMate's working pretty well for most things. And again, using Prolaborate as the collaboration platform to, again, which I think, as you said, Nathalie, has been pretty essential to allow access to this information to all the non-modelers.
Everyone who wants to.
Yep, including the C-level executives and VPs. And then we've got a strategic reporting tool, Essential Cloud, that provides some other types of architecture views for some of those executive audiences. And again, all of this grounded in the reference models from the TM forum. And then lastly, information governance, Nathalie.
So as part of our architecture effort, we wanted to bring the tools, we wanted to bring the digital layer acceleration on best practice, but we also need to have data, right? So our first effort was, because it's a company who came out from 3 other companies, we need to have a good application inventory, or better one than existing. And thanks to the ServiceNow implementation in the company, we could leverage different modules. So we're having not only the application inventory, but the technology inventory, everything in the same model in ServiceNow. That will also allow us to be compliant, but also to better understand our to-be, our as-is, to be able to do our to-be, help to this application rationalization, and make sure that we all have a unique view of the asset of the company. Doesn't matter if you come from data privacy, if you come from business compliance or business continuity, or if you come from security or from operation. So that was really what the value that added this application inventory, and this connection between the technology and the application layer. So in addition of that, of course, to be able to be even more compliant and be able to have a good data privacy, we need to have our data governance, so what to rely on a good data catalog. So we went with Alation, was very easy to use and allow us to quickly scan what we have, to have metadata, but also to have lineage, and to have sampling for different use. And one of them, well, now will be data quality we're working on. And we work closely with this exercise with the operation team for the CMDB integration with the data of the inventory. So we started by the application inventory, we went into the technology inventory, we look for the sponsor within the company, in this case was the operation team, but also the compliance enterprise team. Then things we could not do or we didn't want to do because they are not supposed to be there in the inventory application went into the data catalog, the data governance. So was kind of little pieces of puzzle, putting them together, we started to use to have the big picture. And we needed this information to be able to do a proper repository, because as Chris explained, the information we have on the repository, we go to grab it into ServiceNow. We don't reinvent it or we don't copy it. So it's really a good integration, and we all have the same information at the same time. It's no problem of versioning. And when you want to create a project in your TOGAF iteration, you have all of the information that you need there available in the repository.
Yep, and as you know, I'll be focusing in specifically on some of the details about how we integrated Enterprise Architect with ServiceNow, particularly the APM and PPM and SAFE modules. We are going to be extending that integration to the CMDB as that inventory gets more complete. And we also have an item on our roadmap to also integrate with the data catalog, because we feel there could be some good synergy between the tools, particularly how we might be able to help characterize some of the data using the TM forum SID information model, for example, and possibly correlating, the elements of the data catalog with the APIs that are published by the TM forum and implemented at ATT Mexico through the WSO2 API manager. All right. So when one of our standard approaches for enterprise architecture is to, again, use the TOGAF standards where they make sense to be a foundation for implementing the practice as well as implementing the repository. So this picture here might look familiar to some folks. This is a view of the logical concepts around the architecture repository according to TOGAF. But, as you wouldn't be surprised, this is not a screenshot out of TOGAF. This is an actual custom style diagram in Enterprise Architect. And as you'll see on the next slide, it actually is used for the top level organization structure. And basically each of these boxes, first of all, the big boxes, the architecture repository, the operations repository, solutions and requirements repository, you'll see those are, really represent, significantly different subject matter areas. And then there's a couple of level of boxes below that. But, our meta model is, described in the content meta model area of the repository. Any ATT Mexico specific reference architectures are in the reference library, as well as multiple versions of the TM Forum reference models. As the TM Forum, basically releases a new version of their content every 6 months. And so one of the governance activities we need to help manage is, it's one thing to load a certain version of the TM Forum content and then start mapping things to it. But then what happens when a new one comes out? So we've got the ability to host multiple versions in the same repository, but differentiate the mappings between different versions or migrate them from one version to another. We've got templates for architecture and engineering projects also in the reference library, a set of architecture principles, a list of all of our roadmap projects that come from ServiceNow based on the tower and factory structure that we saw. And then ServiceNow, again, is the system of record where we're getting application and technology info, and then eventually deployment information from the CMDB. Like I said, each one of these boxes, actually maps directly to a structure in the repository, pretty much, one for one. So this, is also, it's a navigation diagram for architects, not necessarily for non-architects, but people that are in the enterprise and solution security and technology architecture space. Since ATT Mexico has aligned itself with TOGAF as a standard, provides, again, a common entry point for looking for different kinds of content. One thing that's worthwhile pointing out, the project portfolio, that's actually, represented in a couple of places. There's actually some of that in the operations repository, actually the list of portfolios and programs and projects, and which are safe epics and features. All that stuff's coming from ServiceNow. So we have the list of all of that stuff in the operations repository, but then every project has its own folder in the solution delivery projects root node, so that we can, so people can have isolation from all the other projects, start making changes to the baseline architecture content separate from the baseline architecture content, and then that allows us to promote those changes to the new architecture baseline when a project is finished. So we're using Prolaborate, as Nathalie said, as the the entry point for most stakeholders, even enterprise and solution architects. Of course, those communities are going to also access this content directly in Enterprise Architect as well. So we've created a landing page that has multiple tabs, where each one of these rectangles gets us to a specific dashboard. Because one of the challenges that we've noticed is that in a mature, complex implementation of Prolaborate, there are a lot of dashboards, like 30, 40, 50, maybe even 100, or so. And making it easy for people to access those dashboards, we found, working with the Prolaborate support team, came up with this novel way to do it. So just FYI for some of the Prolaborate users on the call, this is actually a static HTML web page with a whole bunch of CSS behind it. to make it behave, like a set of tabs. And then just, one of the glimpses of some of the content that we've got in the architecture governance dashboards is a listing of the 3 sets of architecture principles that the architects are supposed to align with. So there are some general purpose EA principles on the left that are very similar to those that are found in TOGAF, as some of you might notice, like, data is an asset or compliance with the law. There also are a set of architecture principles specifically related to the digital transformation around the target architecture. Things like, strategically apply custom, solution development, which is basically a way to say, hey, we should only spend money on the risky business of custom software development when it's strategically important. Namely, we should, as Nathalie was saying, we should prefer open source or packages as our default position to accelerate the implementation, lower the risk, make it more supportable long term. But if we need to do custom development, let's make sure we do it in those areas that really require it. And then the open digital architecture from the TM Forum also has its own set of architecture principles, which are also pretty well aligned with the TOGAF. Again, all of these are defined in the TOGAF convention, which is to have a name of a principle, a statement, and then implications and rationale. So there are some, other dashboards that list out all that additional metadata in the architecture repository. And of course, the way that these things become real, as opposed to just, nice theory and concepts, is through the operation of the Architecture Council, who uses these principles to inform the decisions that are made and the escalations that are required under different types of scenarios. Then we've got a meta model. This is just a little slice of it. So, part of what we want to explain to people, even though we have done a considerable amount of training to the architect community, is, again, what is a meta model and why do we care about what a meta model is? Again, on the right side, you see kind of our core application centric meta model. That's the gray box, a business application. And the reason we call it a business application is because that's what it's called in the ServiceNow APM module. And so one of the things that we also did is, and other speakers have talked about this in some earlier sessions, you want to start with a meta model to identify, what are the different kinds of things you want to keep track of, what are they called, what are their properties, and how are they related to one another. So most of the stuff that you see in blue, those represent some of the key concepts out of the open digital framework from the TM Forum, such as, applications, which are types of applications, ABBs, architecture building blocks. Where business applications are actual pieces of software, those would be SBDs or solution building blocks. And did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Nathalie?
No, what was good for us that was doing the meta model is we decided which component was going to speak with whom. So it was really, we spent a little bit time on that, but was very useful at the end.
Yep, and it was important, the legend also identifies kind of the system of record. So, Enterprise Architect is the system of record of many things, but ServiceNow
but
is
not of application, yes.
And then, WSO2, that's something we'll add to this as we work on that integration and, possibly Elation. But there is a slight, just a slight nuance about business applications, because you'll notice in the legend, I don't know if you can read it or not, but it says EA and ServiceNow. And this is based on the premise that current state applications, the ones that are in operation, those should be coming from ServiceNow, but proposed new applications, particularly when enterprise architects are doing high-level future state architecture, those would be in Enterprise Architect first. But then, once a target architecture gets approved, then someone would add those into ServiceNow as, pending development or pending acquisition, new business applications in the official inventory in ServiceNow.
Correct.
And the other thing maybe is also our ServiceNow integration implementation is based on what's called the CSDM, the Common Services Data Model, which is again the kind of the standard approach that ServiceNow takes when implementing a lot of their core modules, including APM. We also, as Nathalie said, we've done a lot of evangelization to try to raise awareness about what all these things are and why they're important. And then we took some very deep dives into a lot of these standards. So, we didn't do full-blown TOGAF training, but we focused, on those parts of TOGAF that were really the most essential for people to understand in this current phase of deployment. We went through training on ArchiMate, and then how to use Sparx Enterprise Architect to build ArchiMate models. And then, provided office hours and are still doing that, coaching sessions. So, of course, because as everybody knows, it's one thing to learn how to use a new piece of software in a kind of an idealized, controlled environment. But then when it gets to, but how do I really do it? For my project, sometimes those answers aren't clear, or there's multiple choices. And so, we provided support to all of the architects across the organization to, help them put that into context. And we've, recorded all of our sessions. We also partnered with ATT
University. Yeah.
Yep. And so we've used some of these recordings to create, actual learning paths in the ATT Mexico learning management system, along with, assessments, testing, and questions, so that it can be more than just I attended, the training or listened to the recording. I actually, got something out of it and can answer, some basic questions. Another part of our guidance is, how to use Enterprise Architect for engineering projects to create what ATT Mexico calls the project prototype. So that is the actual, models that are being built now in Enterprise Architect that are used by technology and security architecture for review and approval.
So was one of the way to also accelerate the adoption and to evangelize outside of the architecture world into the engineering, the security, the CA, all of the teams who are working around the factory on figuring out where the information is. And for us also to be able to, we are working on to be able to monitor and to evaluate the progress and to understand what is done, what is not, and to also allow, the architects themselves to figure out what level they are, where they are in their expertise.
So one of the things that we've talked about is the foundation based on the TM Forum Open Digital Framework, or ODF. This used to be called Frameworks with an X for, goodness, at least 15 plus years. This is a more recent rebranding, but a lot of some of that legacy content is still around, particularly what's called ETOM, the business process framework, and SID, the information model. There is another one that's been around for a long time called TAM, the telecommunications application management model. That's being actually slowly deprecated and being replaced by a new thing called the functional framework, which is more tailored towards modern microservice open API implementations. And so what we did at Sparx Services is we took all of this content from the TM Forum, which was spread out over multiple modeling tools and sometimes spreadsheets and web pages, and pulled it all together so that, again, a company like ATT Mexico, doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff, and and I definitely want to give Nathalie credit for inspiring us many years ago to actually build this solution. So one of the things that our customers can expect is that, again, when a new version of the content is published by the TM forum, we create a new version of this, provide it to customers, and then have some tools to help people do analysis about how an old version's been used and how to map things automatically to the new versions, compare different versions of the framework so we can have a model-based perspective about what the differences are. But there's a whole bunch of content in here. I mean, there's, I think, like 2,500 processes, 400 logical applications, 75 open APIs. We also, reverse engineered the Swagger files that the TM forum provides to create UML-based representations of those using a REST API MDG technology that we created. So it's really all about trying to enable end users to actually do architecture and use fit for purpose reusable components, as opposed to talking about architecture or thinking about architecture, because we do plenty of that stuff already as architects. We really want to make sure we can enable customers to be successful as rapidly as possible.
Yeah, and part of the effort, we did a lot of TM forum training and certification across the company, and that was a good thing to be able to all speak the same language. So it was really a plus for us adding that.
Yeah, and it just helps round out the architect professional development plans by not just focusing on things like TOGAF and ArchiMate, but things that are very specific to the telecommunications business. And then the other thing that the team, the EA teams put together is a target architecture. Again, some of these diagrams are obfuscated for intellectual property confidentiality purposes, but again, this is another diagram that is an ArchiMate diagram with a lot of custom style that's trying to understand or show some of the different channels where ATT Mexico is trying to influence, and how those are supported by some core digital platforms and then core systems, and then enablers, including on the left some of the digital back end and fulfillment stuff that Nathalie was talking about earlier. I don't know if you want to add anything, Nathalie.
Well, it was a good exercise for us to go through the target architecture and to bring on board piece by piece, depending also for upper management strategy. And we did all of that in the tool. So the idea is for us to be able to govern, so to link whatever is the architect are doing in the engineering project with to see that map, or to help them to map it to the target architecture. Because the idea is not only to do police work, is to give them the tool to do things right, and after to be able to govern, to also help our upper management to make sure we are putting the dollars in the right buckets. So that is our goal.
And and this is something we're getting closer to some of more of the implementation details here, but wanted to start with more some of the outcomes, which is we consider Enterprise Architect to be the system of record of the TM forum reference models. And what we did is we basically exported that stuff out of EA and then loaded it into ServiceNow. And then once in ServiceNow, people can do the mappings, particularly right now between ServiceNow business applications and TAM applications and ETOM processes, for example. And then we then import the business applications and their mappings to the TM forum content, which again was sourced from Enterprise Architect. And then one of the things that it allows us is to put together some Prolaborate dashboards about the application landscape. The diagram on the left is actually one that's an EA diagram that's generated by an add-in that we've created to create landscape maps. So this is using the actual the graphical representation of the TAM model that's available from the TM forum as a big poster. There's this huge, PDF that's 3 feet by 2 feet. Well, since that's, shown at a lot of TM forum shows, a lot of people have that, in their cubicles when people had cubicles. But it also resonated with some of the executive management teams as a common layout scheme. But then what we did is we populated each of the TAM applications, the white boxes, with the actual business applications from ServiceNow. That way people can easily see at a glance, how many applications are supporting different parts of the TAM model, where overinvestment may have occurred, and where there might be some areas that need some additional investment. And then we created some other visualizations, including a nested pie chart that allows us to navigate the same data that's on the landscape diagram, but do it again more interactively using the nested pie functionality. And then, of course, pulling together some charts and graphs about some of the other key architectural and finance data coming from ServiceNow. So one of the things that we had to do was, integrate EA and ServiceNow. So, and one of the things we also had to do, because this was considered an engineering project at ATT Mexico, is we needed to follow the best practices for documenting a project. But, we felt this was a great opportunity for us to provide some guidance to all of the solution delivery teams. Because it wasn't, necessarily evident to people at the beginning, how should I build an ArchiMate model that conforms to our requirements that have been, dictated by security and technology. So for example, here, this is a requirements diagram, again, suppressing the ArchiMate notation, but just trying to identify, what are some of the key high-level features and more detailed requirements that we're trying to address with the integration. So we actually, again, needed to show this integration using the tool. And so here we've got these are actually, again, business applications and modules that come from ServiceNow. And so we changed the color just a little bit from ArchiMate so that people wouldn't confuse these with out-of-the-box ArchiMate application components. And then just doing some, high-level flow relationships between those components, showing what kind of data is, the TM forum reference data is getting to ServiceNow. We're getting back APM, PPM, and safe data. That gets into the database, which is accessed by ProCloud Server, which is then shown in Prolaborate. And we've created a more detailed integration, again, to make it exactly clear, on which different servers. This is all being deployed in ATT Mexico's Amazon virtual private cloud, and what components are running where, what software is being used, what ports and protocols are being used, and again, showing again specific endpoints. So, for example, you were using the ServiceNow table REST API to pull that data into the EA repository using the ETL tool that we've created at Sparx Services North America called Model Flow. And then showing at the bottom how we're doing extracts out of Prolaborate, because as some people may know, you can create an EA report of tabular data and then press a button and download that as a CSV file or a XLS file. And then, that data was then again used by the ServiceNow data loader to update the content in ServiceNow. We figured we really didn't need real-time integration from EA to ServiceNow because, again, the TM forum content changes, at most frequently every 6 months, but we don't necessarily, adopt it. So we might only do this once a year. And then we created an ArchiMate model that represented kind of the standard out-of-the-box implementation of all of the Sparx tools. So ProCloud Server, Prolaborate. Again, just FYI, we're still on Prolaborate 3.6, I think. We do have it on our dashboard, our roadmap to upgrade to Prolaborate 5 in the near future. So again, this is just showing all of the components of the Sparx modeling stack, but how they're going to be deployed in an Amazon type of environment, so a couple of different workspaces, or using another Amazon service called AppStream, and then how that might be integrated with the identity management provider, RDS instances, and an external email system. And then we also used ArchiMate to actually represent the deployment architecture. This is, of course, a little bit obfuscated to not show IP addresses and domain names and stuff. But this is, again, an ArchiMate model, but we used AWS icon library that comes with Enterprise Architect to style it. So to most people, this looks like a diagram that the infrastructure architects created in Visio. In fact, it looks pretty much exactly the same. And so we found, particularly getting down to the infrastructure, a lot of the teams are familiar with doing this in Visio, where they have access to icons like this. And so one of the things that we did, I think it might be coming up on the next slide or shortly thereafter, is putting together an explicit extension of ArchiMate for AWS, and more higher priority for Oracle Cloud and Azure. And I'll show you just a quick glimpse of that in just a moment. And then wanted to just show you a little bit more about the standard structure that, again, every engineering project is required to specify. Again, there are different, usually it's the solution architect that does, sections 1 through 4. And there's, again, subsections that are required in most cases, or sometimes you can put a not up to show that there's no relevance to that. So for example, not every project has reports, section 4.5. And then, one of the things, again, getting back to our training program, after we did some of the basic training on what's TOGAF, ArchiMate, how to build models, and ArchiMate models and Enterprise Architect, we then have come back and done more training on, well, how do you use this tool set to create your prototype? Because again, this is a set of standards that ATT Mexico requires every project to complete, because without it, technology and security architecture will not give their approval for deployment. And then here's just a quick glimpse of the Oracle Cloud OCI MDG technology that we created. So we just, because one of our experiences from using the AWS toolbox out of the box is that we had to manually go find the icon and associate it with the right ArchiMate element, and that was okay for early modeling efforts. But since we wanted to stick again with ArchiMate as being the foundational language, what we've done here for the infrastructure architects is we created a new MDG technology where all of these icons are predefined and associated with new stereotypes that are extending the appropriate ArchiMate stereotypes. Because one of the things that we wanted to be able to get out of that is, again, having things look like Oracle and look like maybe you did it in Visio, but still have the full semantics of the ArchiMate language. So that, for example, when you put these on a diagram, the quick linker that pops up will show, all of the valid ArchiMate relationships plus any extended specific relationships that we defined in the MDG technology. So that's what we wanted to go through today, just to kind of wrap this up and leave a couple minutes if anybody has any questions. Having the executive support of the CEO and the VP of architecture has been absolutely essential. As I'm sure many people have experienced, without the full-fledged support of those key executive stakeholders, a lot of these adoption efforts really don't go anywhere, because people are like, yeah, I really don't have to do it. Who says I have to use the tool? Again, mandatory usage by all project teams has been pretty essential, and it's a part of trying to deliver some, again, executive perspectives of the architecture landscape through Prolaborate. Some things that we're planning on working on. So of course, we're not done yet, even though ATT Mexico has made some great strides and improvements, is to have some tighter alignment with the Digital Transformation Office. So that's where we're going to get into some strategy and initiative mapping. We want to continue maturing architecture governance, and as we talked about a little bit earlier, try to see if we can get direct real-time integration with the API manager. So we have the opportunity to govern the API landscape a little bit more effectively, and again, upgrade to the latest and greatest version of Prolaborate. So I don't know, Nathalie, if you have any closing comments?
Well, that has been interesting and challenging journey, but now we have the result on the foot and we are building on top of it, and it's been exciting. Thank you, Chris.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, thanks, guys. So if there's any questions, Santosh, we'd be happy to try to answer them, or we can, if we run out of time, we'll do it on Slack after.
Thank you.
Thank you.